Great to have you. So as I look at this, and it's kind of staggering, I believe Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, and Facebook are about 20% of the S&P's market cap. On the one hand, there are risks there, but it also seems like those companies overall are pretty stable. So in a way, are they stabilizing the index as well?
Well, it's really a function of they are the market, right? You look at those companies, an index, number one, represents the marketplace. And the marketplace right now is valuing those companies better than a lot of other companies. Their businesses certainly are doing well, but that's not a factor in terms of where they show up in the index. It's really their market cap. And as their businesses continue to do well, their global businesses, they're leaders in their markets, investors are bidding up their values. And so therefore, it's going to show up in higher weighting in an index like the S&P 500.
It occurs to me also that all of these companies owe their valuations in large part to the cloud. Microsoft with Azure, Apple's services strategy is heavily weighted in the cloud and its app store. Amazon, of course, the leader in the cloud. Alphabet, Google, pretty much everything it does is in the cloud. Facebook as well. And then there's regulatory also. It's unusual, isn't it, to have so much of the S&P's valuation linked to a couple of issues?
I think, look, this goes over time. We've gone through these cycles. If you look back, it was financials back in the early 90s. It was consumers earlier than that. So you go through these sort of cycles. There's no value judgment on these companies that get added to the index or they're weighting in the index. It's really just reflecting what's the market is how the market is valuing them. We don't offer any judgment on these companies.
Alex, S&P Dow Jones Indices oversees and has hundreds of thousands of indices. Obviously, the S&P and the Dow are the most popular. But in general, have you found that there has been a surge or unexpected demand in other types of indices or products with everything we're seeing happening in this outbreak?
Well, I think certainly what's happening has been shown the true value of an index, right? And an index is many different uses. Number one, measuring these markets. So how do you know what's happening in these markets, not just in the U.S., but globally? But also it's allowed investors to hedge some of their risks using options and futures based on our indices or taking views through ETFs and index funds. And as you mentioned, we have over 800,000 indices, and many of them have products tied to them. So it's really about giving investors choices. And in these sorts of markets, investors need to reposition their portfolios, and these indices allow them to do that.
Alex, are there other indices that might better do what the S&P has traditionally done, which is represent kind of big companies in the economy overall? It seems to me if you're an investor who's just looking to bet on the U.S. economy, it's harder to do now in the S&P, one could argue, because really you're in large part betting on those 5 stocks. What are your other options?
Well, I think, look, that represents the U.S. marketplace, right? And of course, a lot of these companies are global in nature. A lot of their revenue comes from global markets. So it's just a function that the S&P 500 represents what's going on in U.S. markets. There's other indices, certainly mid-cap, small-cap. There's many index choices out there. But in terms of representing the U.S. economy, there's nothing better really than the S&P 500. It is the most widely used index globally as the measure of the U.S. market and the U.S. economy because of that.
Does this, I mean, I guess part of what I'm asking is the criticism traditionally of the Dow is that it's weighted toward these particularly large companies. It seems like the S&P in these times, given these 5 companies, is taking on more of that attribute, is it not?
I would disagree. I mean, the Dow is a price-weighted index, and so the weighting scheme is really a function of what's the highest price stock in the index. It's 30 stocks. The S&P 500 as capitalization weighted really measures the value of a company in the U.S. marketplace. And again, U.S. marketplace really has become a global marketplace because all of these companies, while they're listed and they traded here, are really global businesses nowadays. So I think it is very representative of the marketplace. Certainly the S&P 500 represents the larger cap portion of it. It represents roughly 60% of the U.S. market capitalization. As we said, it is a little more concentrated than it has been historically, but that's just, I think, a function of the companies themselves that continue to do well.